just start to do tomorrow to become better trainers?
So I think the first thing is we need to educate ourselves. So we need to read more, we need to explore more, and again, outside the profession. So what is it that they're doing in these other professions, in emergency medicine and in aviation and in mining and some of these other professions? What are they doing in the world of coaching? But we need to educate ourselves, and so we need to read more and listen to podcasts like what you do, and follow your work and the work of many others. And we need to attend conferences. So you talked about, a Safety 2 conference or conferences on education, but there's a lot of trainers conferences around that are focused on law enforcement training. There's a number, I believe, over in Europe. The International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association is the big one in North America, and we certainly have an international contingent there. But we need to get out and start to read and understand some of the information around learning and around teaching. So how do humans effectively learn? Not just from a motor learning perspective, but the motor learning is important. So skill acquisition, skill adaptation, how do we address that? But also how do we learn the information? And then how do we start to apply some of this? So I think we need to get out and more and start to look at what information is out there. We need to come at it with an open mind, but a strong filter. So an open mind meaning I need to be open to new information, but I also need to put that information through these filters, because I've been to presentations, seen information online that, people are putting this out there. And when you look at it and take a step back and say, is it in alignment, congruent with the research on learning and the realities of stress and the effects of stress on learning and other things? It's not. So we need to have that filter to put that through. And is this applicable, and how is it applicable? Because a lot of the information is not done with law enforcement for law enforcement. I think we're doing a better job of that. You interviewed Bill Lewinsky recently in Force Science, and a lot of the people that they're affiliated with have done a great job of doing police-specific, law enforcement-specific research. But there's a whole body of research out there involving humans. And that's why when we talk about things like human factors, these are human factors. They're not cop factors. All humans are subject to this. And so what does the research from all these domains say? So first of all, I think we need to educate ourselves. And then what we need to do is look for examples and find people that have implemented some of these strategies. And again, it doesn't have to be in our domain. If we can find those, great. So, because I can look at the research. So I can look at the research, say, on learning and education, and say, well, the keys to make learning stick is we need to engage in reflection and active or effortful retrieval, and we need to have spaced practice or spaced repetition, and we need to have desirable difficulties, and we need to incorporate interleaving. But if I don't know what that means, if I don't know how to do that, it's useless information, or it's of limited use. So I need to find people that can say, here's how you do it in simple, effective ways. Here's how you can do it in small chunks within the box world that you live in, within the constraints that you have. Here's how you can do it. Things like ecological dynamics. There are places like the Netherlands that have been doing that in law enforcement training for a long time. It's not common in North America, but what we're seeing now is more people in the realm of sports. So martial artists, we're seeing Souders that are having a tremendous influence in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world in implementing that, and other people like Scott Seaverite and others that are weaving it into MMA training and a whole range. And there's a couple of podcasts, martial arts podcasts, that are just basically about ecological dynamics in the martial arts. So we can start to look to these other people and look at how they're doing that, and then start to apply it. We can reach out to some of these coaches whether, so I've interviewed whitewater canoe coach, Division I college volleyball coach, and other people that are doing this. I've interviewed people that work with NFL athletes and other people that are incorporating these. So that's where we need to reach out and then figure out what are other people doing. When we look at some of that research in North America, there's an academy in Oregon. So the state of Oregon is somewhat unique in North America in that there is one basic academy for the entire state. Wow. So every law enforcement officer goes through what they call DPSST, which stands for Department of Public Safety Standards and Training Academy in Salem, Oregon. And so a few years ago, they revamped their entire curriculum to make it evidence-based and research informed and apply these principles. So, and they're very good. I've interviewed Stacy Utsey, who is now the director of training there, who was the head curriculum design person during this evolution. And I've interviewed a number of people from different areas to talk about how they're applying it in their firearms, how they're applying it in their scenario training, how they're applying it in their physical education training. So there's people out there that are doing this that we can find some of that.
Yeah.
And listening to Tim Ferriss interviewed on the Andrew Huberman podcast a little while ago, Tim Ferriss was asked, how do you seem to like see around corners and see into the future? What he said is, one of the things that he said is, I look to the practitioners. What are the great coaches and the practitioners doing? Because they're going to be well ahead of the papers. So when great coaches and practitioners are having success with something, they're probably going to be 3 to 5 years ahead of the randomized controlled trials and the papers in that area. So don't just look to the papers, look to what the great practitioners are doing. And then the last thing I would say is ask yourself, where might the smallest change make the biggest difference? So what can I do within my circle of control and my circle of influence to start to apply this in small chunks and small pieces, to test it, to assess it, and then to iterate and make it better if I need to, but just start to make small changes. You don't have to change your entire curriculum. That's going to be very difficult to do and very rare that anybody has the ability to do that.
Yeah.
But regardless of what restrictions I have, there's things that I can do to start to apply some of this and then to start to build on it. So those would be the 3 things that I would start with.
Well, great. So to summarize, to educate yourself and to go to other disciplines, look for organizations and people who already do new stuff, better stuff, and also make small changes with big results. What was your beautiful sentence?
Where might the smallest change make the biggest difference? And that's a question I borrowed from Dr. Robert Cooper, a neuroscientist. So
that's great, because the last one I think is very important, because I think that most of my colleagues, but also myself as a teacher at physical education, applied university, we have a kind of feeling that we are stuck in this format and that we have no autonomy and the constraints are there. So, well, let's go on routine mode. But I think if you can make small changes, even within the silos, even within the constraints, then I think it gives a kind of autonomy and empowering.
Yes. And then you can continue to build on that. So even within those constraints, there's a lot you can do to implement some of these strategies. Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. We have